Hello. The funniest programme on Radio 4? Or a waste of space, rubbish, drivel?
I hear there's been some feedback listeners complaining about my programme. I'm not having that. You want to get out in the garden or something when it's on, eh? Get some water on your misanthropums or something.
This week, a strong comeback by Radio 4's comedy creation Count Arthur after criticism on last week's feedback. We bring fans and critics together and stand well back as they fight it out. Now, critics of Count Arthur Strong's radio show were in full cry in last week's feedback. This week, we've had more appalled emails, some outraged that the Count is still on the air, and many others outraged that anyone dare criticise the man they consider to be a comic genius. We decided the only thing for it was to bring the two warring factions into the same studio and let them slug it out.
Though why on earth you'd be interested in that, I do not know.
Well, just listen. In the red corner, two fans, Mike Saunders and Stephen Brain. And in the blue corner, two very robust critics, Ian Green and Rachel Jones, who was also one of last week's correspondents. I asked all four to listen to the final edition of this series of Count Arthur Strong, and then tell me what they thought. First, arch-critic Ian. I don't think he enjoyed the experience.
That was torture.
It was.
Why is it torture?
I had to listen to it twice because I was so bored the first time. I just lost the plot. Well, there isn't a plot. So I listened to it very patiently the second time. The words are stupid. There's no storyline. It's just a bunch of little scenarios dotted here and there that have no link to each other, really.
Mike Saunders, you're closer to my age than you are to a number of our other guests, and you say that Count Arthur is one of the funniest, if not the funniest comedian I have ever heard or seen.
Can I just challenge this point about there's no plot, there's no story, it's just a load of words scrambled together? Because listening to it last night, there was some very interesting little plots, some of them somewhat surreal, I must admit. He comes home from his holidays and he's looking for his cat. And he's calling the cat by name, and he's asking for the cat, and he suddenly realises he hasn't got a cat. Now, OK, you can say this is Goon Show, this is Monty Python, I don't know, but there's another instance where he's complaining about a gift that he's been offered over the telephone, and it's going to be a car, a speedboat, a pen, or so on. He's writing a letter of complaint about this. He suddenly discovers he's got no pen. So he then has to phone up the premium line telephone and get a pen in order to write the letter of complaint. I mean, it is pure Spike Milligan.
Rachel, do you accept that there is a plot, there is something that travels, the narrative that goes through the programme, it's not just discontinuous?
No, I think it's what Ian was saying, it's too bitty. There is no real sort of overarching plot. When it got to the cat bit, I really just wanted to switch off. I was
yes,
like,
me too.
what is going on? And I really thought that if there's ever an episode that I would really enjoy, the last one of the series would be, the big finale episode. But it didn't exactly go out with a bang. It just sort of flopped over and it just finished and that was it.
Well, Stephen Brain, you said when you wrote to us, you were surprised by the level of antagonism last week. Could this be the funniest programme on Radio 4 they were talking about? You believe Count Arthur is the funniest programme?
It's interesting. That was almost a description of Monty Python. Not connected anyway, rather silly. And I see a real traditional form of humour. He's almost like the fool. He's licensed to say the unsayable. He's a sort of loser like Don Quixote or Hancock or Rimmer from Red Dwarf and Laurel and Hardy. They all share sort of character traits, ignorance, naivety, pomposity.
It's too silly. And there's an over-reliance on malapropisms. It's the same joke over and over again. He's an old man and he gets his words wrong.
I think you'll find malapropisms in a great deal of humour. You find it with Hilda Baker, you'll find it with Mrs. Slocum, and of course originally you found it in Sheridan, didn't you, with Mrs. Malaprop?
I agree that malapropisms can be really, really funny, but because there's so many of them, there's just no effort put into them anymore. I mean, Long John Saliva, it's just ridiculous.
It makes me laugh listening to it. I'm sorry.
Now as well.
Yeah, Rachel's absolutely right. It just goes on and on and on. I used to listen, or still do, to the Goon Show, and they all make use of deliberately messing the words to suit the occasion, but only infrequently, not as the main subject of the play.
If you think of it as a sort of tradition of both humour, but also wordplay. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Lewis Carroll, and Edward Lear, Milligan. And if, referencing the Goons, I mean, in the Goon shows, the jokes are repetitive and come thick and fast.
Mike Saunders, I wonder if you detected any of this, a suggestion that the southeast perhaps responds in a rather different way than the north. Some people have written to us who suggested that actually what's going on here is people with northern accents are not found funny by people in the south.
Well, I used to live in Doncaster, actually. But no, I don't think it's a north-south divide so much as a division, I think, between people who perhaps have had some kind of career experience similar to Count Arthur's. A faded thespian, a man who goes on endlessly about his successes in life, which of course have been grossly magnified.
Are you suggesting you have something in common with Count Arthur, Mike?
Well, I'm not a thespian. I used to be a lecturer, but I mean, thespians, lecturers, vicars, priests, we're all in the same game, really, aren't we? And I think there tends to be a kind of selective recall of our past triumphs and tend to forget our failures in the same way that Count Arthur does.
I think possibly the problem with something like Count Arthur Strong in the 6:30 slot is I've just come home from work, or I'm just on my way home from work, and I'm knackered, and I don't really want to have to work quite so hard for the comedy that's in that slot. And so maybe if you are going to commission something that's quite so divisive, maybe just put it at another time, or maybe on 4 Extra, which seems to have an audience of more culty devoted listeners.
I never listen to it at 6:30 in the evening, because if I am in, most evenings, I'm chief cook and bottle washer. So I don't want to miss a word of it with clattering pans and things frying or boiling or whatever. So I always listen to it on 4 Extra several times, I have to say, which is great, or on iPlayer, which, of course, you can do the repeat on.
I can imagine Rachel's face at the moment.
I think I'd rather be doing the cooking and the washing of the dishes.
I think they agreed to disagree there. But thanks anyway to Ian Green, Rachel Jones, Mike Saunders and Stephen Brain. And next week I'll be talking to the editor who commissioned Count Arthur Strong, Caroline Raphael. If you've any questions for her about any comedy on Radio 4, please... Our thanks to Ben Preston and to all of you who contributed to Ask Roger. Do contact us with any of your queries, and talking of wireless humour, would you please do the honours, Count?
You can write to Feedback, P.O. Box 67234, London SE1P4AX, or leave a phone message on 03333 444 544. Oh, so don't ask me to read that out again. There are too many 3s and 4s in that for a telephone number. It's a wonder anyone gets through. Standard line charges apply, but it could cost more on some mobile networks. And you can email Feedback at feedback@bbc.co.uk, or find us on Twitter at BBCR4Feedback. All those details are on our website, whatever that means. Dear, oh dear, the things to think up these days.